Welcome to Civilly Speaking with host Sean Harris. Each month, Civilly Speaking brings you interviews on practical and timely legal issues on the local and national level. We hope you enjoy today's show.
Hello, I'm your host Sean Harris, and this is episode 66 of Civilly Speaking, brought to you by the Ohio Association for Justice. Today we have a few guests joining us for this special episode on life-changing cases that we hope appeals to attorneys and non-attorneys alike. We're going to be speaking with 4 attorneys today who, through their pursuit of justice, made a real difference in their clients' lives. We hope these stories inspire you and remind you of the impact we have as advocates for our clients. And for anyone listening who's not an attorney, we hope this discussion provides some perspective on the important role of the civil justice system in our lives. Suing someone is sometimes portrayed as a retaliatory or vindictive action, when in reality, it's a necessary step in the process of making things right and even healing after something unfortunate has occurred. Today we're going to celebrate those moments where the justice system did exactly that. First off, we have Andy Young, who is the managing partner of the law firm for Truck Safety's Cleveland office. Andy, thanks so much for joining us here on Civilly Speaking.
Sean, thank you. Thank the OAJ team and staff and members for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all.
Have you had the opportunity in your practice to represent folks who, through the case and afterwards, have become inspirational to you?
Yeah, frequently we all represent folks that become our friends or part of our members of family after we're done with the case. But there's a number of clients, it's a smaller percentage, but we're trying to grow that percentage, who have taken their case and some of the proceeds that we were able to achieve for them and taken it to charitable levels or levels of safety advocacy. So I've got a story I can tell you about if the listeners are interested.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I had this young man, he was in his 30s, who was unfortunately killed in a semi-truck underride crash. His mom was awesome and still is awesome, quite frankly. She has taken his case and his crash to the next level. So during the pendency of the case, she got active in some of the underride safety advocacy initiatives. She even went to the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety's crash test facility in Ruckersville, Virginia, for an underride roundtable, and I was at that particular event with her. She then came back a second time for the Underride Roundtable 2 that happened at the same place, and then she spoke as a panelist to talk about the experience that she had with her son. And then she's even participated as far as getting her son's name put on the Stop Underrides bill, which is pending before Congress now, and it's going to be reintroduced with the new Congress. And then in addition to that, she is a board member of the Institute for Safer Trucking, which is a Washington, D.C.-based trucking advocacy group. So her work, and with her husband, Randy, I don't want him, her name's Lori, and her husband, Randy, do incredible work, which is extraordinarily inspirational to try to make sure that these crashes don't happen to somebody else. So frequently in our crashes, I'm always inspired by our clients' courage to use litigation as an opportunity to make our roadways safer, one truck company and one truck driver at a time. But I'm even more inspired by my clients who then go the next level and go to a safety advocacy side of it to turn the memory of their son or lost son or daughter into efforts to bring stories to Capitol Hill to try to make some significant changes to make sure these things don't happen to anybody else. So I'm grateful and thankful at this time of year in particular for those folks to use their stories for greater good and change.
It is remarkable that we all have clients who have different goals, right? All clients may have a different goal in pursuing a claim. But when someone takes on the industry or takes on the cause, even after the case, that's very touching.
Yeah, it's awe-inspiring, and it helps all of us to want to even be better people and do more and try to do things like our clients. And I found that currently with a lot of my clients, if we can direct them or steer them, if they haven't already gone there themselves, into things like this, it helps them with the grieving process. And I have a client, for example, who lost 2 young boys in a truck crash. That case is pending, and that client has actually turned her boys' names into a charitable cause, and then, which is a toy drive between the 2 boys' birthday in the summertime. There's about a 5 to 6 week time frame between the 2 boys' birthday, and she works hard for a toy drive and has these businesses that collect the toys, and then they collect them all together and give them to children's hospitals or children in need. And it's really cool that they've done that in the memory of their boys. I have another woman who's a bicycle advocate who has taken on a bicycle advocacy type role to bring about Vision Zero type initiatives and allow for better environments on our roadways to accommodate bicyclists. And another individual who lost her son in a truck underride, she adopted the rural roadway state route in Ohio for the 2-mile area, where in an adopt a highway type fashion, because she likes to tend to the memorial that she left there. So she gives her an opportunity to tend to the memorial for her son and also clean up the roadway at the same time. And all these folks who have done this, you can see that they've transferred their grief or sorrow into something more, or their tragedy into sort of like a triumph, or victim to victor, or sorrow to strength type of a scenario. And we should try to get our clients to do more of that, because especially if the case is pending, because then when they get on the stand in a jury trial, hey, what did you do to memorialize your son or your daughter? Well, I've actually tried to make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else, and I'm trying to protect it. And essentially the message is you're trying to protect the jurors and their families from this happening to them as well, by fighting in Congress or through a state legislative effort or some initiative to make sure that these tragedies don't repeat themselves, because they're all preventable at the end of the day, and it'd be nice if they don't happen to somebody else.
And it really is the process of going through, whether it's pre-suit or litigation, the process of bringing a claim, and if there's a financial compensation awarded at the end, that allows lots of these people to do these things.
That's absolutely right. So the results that we get not only help, number one, make their lives better, but number two, they can use those funds to memorialize their family member, or if it's somebody who's horrifically injured, to take care of themselves. But they can also use these funds for awareness initiatives and to spread their stories, so that these stories get out across the country in order to create better change. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do at the national level, at the AHA level, is trying to collect 50 stories from 50 states of underride to take to each of the senators, so that each state has a specific story to their constituency, and then hopefully expand that to 150 stories, one for rear underride, one for side underride, one for front underride, and then potentially even expand it up to 435 stories for each of the House of Representatives, so that these stories then create some significant change. So one of the things I want to put out to the listeners is, if you have an underride story, let us know about it, so that we can find who the state reps are, or the state or the Congress people are in that particular district, so we can take that story and put it into a database that we've created to help create some real positive change, so these things don't happen to others.
Thanks, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and all my best to you.
Appreciate it. Next up, we have Alan Tittle, co-owner and founder of the Cleveland firm of Tittle and Perlmuter. Alan, thanks very much for joining us here on Civilly Speaking.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about an individual case that you've handled where you feel like you were able to make a difference.
Sure. And, every case, I don't want to sound generic here, but every case I handle, that's one of our goals, is to not only make a difference in our clients' lives, but to the general public. We want to make sure that the society, we leave it a little safer than it was before the case. But one case that really jumps out to me has to do with an unfortunate, tragic incident of medical malpractice. And my client was in his 20s, and he went to the ER complaining of a headache. And they found out that he had a condition called hydrocephalus, which is, water on the brain. It's a fixable thing. So what you do is you go in, you put a shunt in and drain the fluid. And so when he went to have that procedure, the blood supply through his carotid artery was cut off. And as a result, he essentially became a vegetable, and he was vent dependent. And so when I say vent dependent, he was on a ventilator, he's hooked up the machines. It's the only way that he could breathe, the only way he could live. And so his mom, who lived in Florida, flew up, left her life in Florida, quit her job. Her husband was down there, and decided, I need to devote my life to my son. And essentially stayed with him almost 24 hours a day, unless she had to go, eventually she had to find a part-time job delivering pizzas just to make a little cash. But left her life and devoted it to her son. So she's sitting there at his bedside at the nursing home, and he's in and out of the ICU. He's not doing well. We were able to resolve this case, and as a result, she got a medical flight for her son to move him down to Florida, number one. Number two, she transformed her home into a hospital. And so she was able to essentially pay for around-the-clock care for her son. And miraculously, he started improving.
And that doesn't happen normally.
That doesn't happen. And so here's a guy that went from ICU trip every other month, pneumonia, things aren't looking good, he could pass at any moment, to improvement. And the last time I talked to her, and I keep in touch because this was something really important, a really important case to me. They began the process of weaning him off the vent, it's literally a miracle. And so that's in process. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I can tell you right now, as a result of that case, this mother has her life back and has given her son the best chance to have the best quality life that he can. And I think that really signifies why we do this. We save this kid's life, and we let the mother have her life again, back. She's back with her husband. So I'm pretty proud of that case, to say the least.
Well, and I think the point, just to underscore kind of what you're saying here is that, and maybe we take it for granted sometimes that, gosh, that's the right result, but those results don't happen unless we take these cases and we force the issue.
Absolutely. And not only we need to take these cases, we need to pursue them, but eventually the community as a large has to step up if this thing would have went to a jury verdict and do the right thing. They'd have to enforce the safety rules that doctors, hospitals have to follow. But that's why we do this. This is why us as lawyers, we got to make the right calls and, step forward and do the best we can for our clients, but also the best we can for our community.
Did you ever imagine when you were in law school that you, as a result of your cases, you might literally save a life?
When I went to law school, I knew I wanted to be a litigator, but I had no idea what that really meant. It's funny. When you go to law school, you don't even know what a lawyer really is. At least I didn't. I didn't come from a family of lawyers or anything like that. I thought, you pop in at court, you try your case, and you go on your merry way. What I didn't realize is the impact, not only that you can have real impact on people, but how emotionally invested you get in your cases. And when something goes wrong, one of my cases, my family knows it, and that might not be the right thing. But I take these things to heart. And I never in a million years thought that when I went to law school, I would be doing something like this that makes that big of a difference, that literally saves lives.
I think that's awesome.
Good.
Appreciate it. And next, joining us is Eleana Drakatos. Eleana is a founding partner of the Columbus firm of Yacobozzi Drakatos and is a past president of the Ohio State Bar Association. Eleana, thanks so much for joining us here on Civilly Speaking.
Thank you for having me, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Oftentimes, trial lawyers tend to be focused primarily on the financial aspect of a settlement or a verdict, but of course, there's lots of other important work being done aside from that in these cases.
Yes, that is true. And when you asked me to be one of your interviewees of this podcast, that's what I thought. I thought that as trial lawyers that we really focus on the result. And sometimes we tend to forget, because we are result-oriented as attorneys, but sometimes we tend to forget those other sort of contemporaneous positives that come along with a resolution of a case. So in preparing for your podcast today, I thought I went through my cases and thought of a couple to share with you and your audience on how we made a difference, how our firm made a difference in our clients' lives.
Tell us about that.
Sure. So the one case that I thought of was a case involving a birth injury. And anybody that's done a case like this knows that it is a difficult case. It's an expensive case. And it's really important that you do a good job as an attorney, because there's a lot at stake. But what was interesting about this particular case was the fact that this involved a very young couple, a young family, their first baby. And this was a friend of an attorney friend who just happened to be at a gathering with a client and their young baby at the time, and just in discussion saying that, hey, there are the milestones here that we feel we should be witnessing or we should be going through, we're not. And our attorney friend says, hey, I think that you need to look into it some. And I think you need to maybe call my friend, Eleana, and talk to her about it. And this young family really, they knew something had happened at birth. They never really got any answers from the doctors as to what possibly could have happened. So we did an initial review and we talked to them, and they had absolutely no intention of pursuing anything because they were just left with unanswered questions, but never really thought that there could be liability involved. And we weren't at all pushy. What we wanted to do was provide them answers, and we did an initial review, and we said, you know what, this is what we think happened. How do you feel about it? And we went through that process, and I thought that was a really important process to go through. Instead of jumping in and saying, hey, we're gonna file lawsuits, we talked a lot about feelings, and we talked a lot about what is at stake when you file a lawsuit, what happens when you go through the process. And we decided together that we would assemble a team and we would go through with filing a lawsuit. And this young family did not really realize what the future involved. When you have a child that has a disability, you don't realize, first off, you don't want to accept it, but second of all, you don't realize the cost that is involved in that. So I think that the approach that we took really helped the client come to grips with reality and also with what needed to be done and how to do that so they can have some resolution, but also some closure about and have their questions answered, which they were very appreciative of. And they just send me a photograph of their second baby that they just had, and a healthy baby and a wonderful pregnancy. So we felt that we helped those clients get answers to their questions and provide them stability for the future and allowed them have another baby and continue with their family. So we really felt that made a big difference in their lives.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that story points out the fact that there can be, and there often are, multiple reasons or purposes for going through a claim aside from just making a financial recovery.
Sure. And anybody that's done this work, and that's probably the 90% of your audience, Sean, we hear this repeatedly. I just want an answer. I don't know what happened. My provider isn't calling me back, or I went to the appointment and I still left and had questions and didn't know what happened. And really what hurt our client the most is that she wasn't given the information that needed to be given to her in order to make the right decision of how her labor was progressing. Let's just say it was very sloppy. In giving her that answer and telling her it's not your fault, right? All the defenses were basically eliminated in our case. It wasn't your fault. It's not your genes, and you did nothing wrong. Just to give her that satisfaction was, to our team, it was priceless.
Yeah, and satisfaction, maybe in other words, peace of mind. To not
Peace of mind, right.
Not carry around that guilt.
That's right.
That's fantastic, Eleana. You mentioned another case came to mind.
Yeah, Sean, we had another case, and it was a rather bizarre fact pattern, but we had a case where a truck hauling strawberries ran into our client's house at 4 in the morning. And really, that was a first for me. Maybe not for our colleagues that do more trucking cases.
Yeah, I had a blueberry case one time, but not a strawberry.
So yeah, this was a little bizarre fact pattern, but we had a client fell asleep on the couch, like many guys do, watching TV, and there was a truck hauling strawberries, and we never litigated the case, so I don't know what happened to the truck driver, but we certainly all can guess that he might have been tired, he might have been going beyond his hours. You know, when we started asking all those questions, the case quickly resolved, but the truck driver drove literally into his house. The cab of the truck entered the house through the wall, pushing the client on the couch to the other end of the house. I mean, it's sort of like an action movie, the way they described it to us and played it in my head. But so the wife is asleep in the bedroom, and she thinks a plane fell on the house, not knowing what's going on. She runs out and tries to run out, I should say, and can't get out of the bedroom. Long story short, they're all extracted from the house. Thankfully, there were injuries, of course, but they weren't as severe as they could have been. But this case was a case where we had to act really quickly because these clients, in a matter of 30 seconds, lost pretty much everything. And our paralegal, who's the best paralegal in the world, in my opinion, did a full accounting of all of the items in the house. We even down to salt and pepper shakers. I mean, things were just completely destroyed. And we had to work really quickly because they had now no house. They were injured. They had lost their pets. They were shocked. I mean, the emotional distress of the wife was significant. And I think that particular case comes to mind because in a split second, these folks lost it all, and we had to basically reconstruct everything in record time. And that wasn't easy. This was a newly married young couple living in a rental without renter's insurance, and that alone put a lot of pressure on them. And they were so grateful at the end of the day to be able to get a resolution so they can get a roof over their head, get the treatment that they needed, and they went off and started a family successfully. But it was that short amount of time that we had to basically put their life back together. So I feel that was so labor intense, but we were able to do it, and I think they felt very grateful at the end of the day.
And what a great result to be able to help them literally put their lives back together.
It was really an interesting case and a really heart-wrenching one. But we were happy at the end of the day that everything turned out for them.
Finally, we have Brian Miller from Columbus. He's with the firm of Brian G. Miller, and we're very happy to have him with us here today. Brian, thanks for joining us here on Civilly Speaking.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate being here.
I know you had a case in the last couple of years that took on some importance both for the client as well as bringing awareness to the defendant at fault about their systems and what was going on with them. Tell us about that.
Sure. Our case involved a woman who was just shy of 40 years old who was operating her vehicle on a rural roadway and for some reason that we never ascertained lost control of the vehicle and hit a utility pole on the side of the road. The utility pole actually collapsed, more or less entrapping her vehicle with electric lines, and she had to be rescued from the vehicle and taken to a hospital.
Now, by the way, let me stop you right there. A lot of lawyers would say, there's no case. She ran off the road. Where's the case?
Sure, and that certainly was a great challenge because one of the great concerns, not only when we thought about taking this case and debated whether we should take this case, but also all the way up until and including trial, was exactly that, the concern that others would simply say, look, your client was at fault. She lost control of her vehicle. She went off the roadway. You shouldn't be pointing a finger at anybody else. Her injuries are her own fault. In this instance, while arguably there certainly was some truth to that, her most significant injuries were caused, we argued, as a result of a delayed response to the scene. All of the first responders, the medical folks, the police officers, and so forth who were there to help her, arrived on a timely basis, but the electric company that needed to respond in order to allow others to access her did not. We argued there was at least a 30-minute delayed response on their part.
I know one of the important results of the case, aside from any financial result, was forcing the company to deal with some of its systems and processes that led to this delay.
Yeah, in fact, we had argued that there were systemic problems with exactly that, with the way the company received emergency calls and how they managed those emergency calls, ultimately getting field personnel out to the scene. We argued that, in fact, it was because of the systemic failures or errors that delays were caused, just like the ones in our case. And you had, asked before, for instance, about, well, weren't you concerned that others would say that this was really your own client's fault? And again, initially one could say that that was the case, but we had argued that but for the delayed response, she would have arrived at a hospital a half hour earlier. And ultimately, the most significant aspect of this case was not the couple broken ribs and other internal injuries that she suffered as a result of the collision itself, but the fact that she had been bleeding internally because of those injuries, and ultimately because of the delay, she hemorrhaged, losing significant blood, losing flow of blood, and ultimately losing circulation of oxygen to her brain. As a result, she suffered an oxygen-deprived or anoxic brain injury, which left her permanently disabled.
I think another challenge that you faced in that case was the fact that it was in a rural area where verdicts tended to be lower.
Well, you're absolutely right. Leading up to trial, we were told multiple times that not only was this your client's fault, perhaps other people's fault, including folks at the hospital that arguably could have done things differently, but that even if we were victorious, number one, our verdict would be significantly reduced by comparative negligence, and moreover, that our verdict would be limited significantly in the first place because in many conservative or rural areas of the state, juries simply aren't inclined to offer meaningful non-economic damages. We thought, given the nature of this case and the nature of our client, and certainly the impact upon her and her family, not just her, but other family members, which I'm also happy to speak to, that non-economic damages should be very significant. And in fact, we were greatly satisfied and in some sense humbled by the fact that the jury agreed with us so resoundingly. And that was important as well because ultimately the jury's position in that regard in terms of non-economic damages and damages in general ultimately put us in a position where we were able to provide for our client and for her family in ways that no one could have but for a result like the one that we were able to obtain.
Brian, talk to us about how, as a result of bringing this case, it helped not only your client but her family continue on with their lives.
Yeah, that's a great question, and frankly, should be one of the things that motivates us in terms of what we do. As I had suggested before, my client was shy of her 40th birthday when this happened. She was a nurse who was a very productive member of society, worked a couple jobs, and did quite well financially in terms of providing for herself and her son, who at the time was 10 years old. As a result of what happened to her, she simply became incapacitated on a level where she was unable to take care of herself and obviously unable to take care of others, such as her son. One fortunate component of the circumstances were that her mother lived in relatively close proximity to her. Her mother was also a nurse by training. that was positive from the standpoint that her mother could take care of her. However, the care that was required was so significant that her mother had to quit her job and basically care for our client around the clock. Her mother was also somebody who was in her mid-60s at the time, and so obviously her ability to care for her daughter was going to be finite. The funds that were received through the award of compensation from the jury in this case not only alleviated financial pressures on our client and her mother and her son, but made a lot of things possible for the family that would not have been possible before, such as very practical renovations to their house that allowed her to move around in a much more practical fashion. They purchased a van that enabled them to do the same thing. They certainly had resources to pursue simple things like vacations, which would add joy to life that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And they were able to care for the son in ways that they wouldn't have. They were able to provide education for the son. And ultimately, when the mother becomes unable to care for my client, she will have the resources to provide her a facility, not just any facility, but a facility with an attention toward neurological and brain injury aspects that will really provide the care that puts this young woman in a position that she couldn't have otherwise been in.
And how did that feel as her counsel?
Well, I'll tell you, I think a lot of people look at a result or an event like this as something that proverbially happens overnight. This certainly did not. This was a journey that for our law firm and for all the people involved lasted 4 years for all the people involved. And there were a lot of challenges thrown at us by folks opposing us, folks with large resources on the other side of this case. There were a lot of times that we were told we were going to lose, or certainly if we had any chance of winning, that we wouldn't be able to do so on a level that was commensurate with what I just described in terms of helping the family, caring for the needs, and so forth. There was a significant sense of, quite candidly, relief, but also great satisfaction when we crossed the finish line and we realized that we had accomplished something that would be really nothing short of life-changing for the family. Obviously, we were capable as human beings of turning the clock back and eliminating injuries like this altogether. That would be the preferred result. But with the inability to do that, providing resources to make life as whole or as close to normal with amenities that really help and make life better is what we're really trying to achieve as a bottom line in what we do. And this was a significant success in that regard.
Well, thank you all for being here on Civilly Speaking and sharing your stories with us. And thanks to all our listeners out there. Please follow us on Spotify or subscribe to our channel on Apple Podcasts to stay informed about all our latest episodes. And we'll see you here on the next episode of Civilly Speaking.